Welcome grade 10s to Cell School for Life Sciences. This is week 11. We're going to be looking at a new section of work from today. We're going to be investigating tissues. Now, you've already learnt that the cell is the smallest functional unit of any living organism. But what we need to understand is that cells do not work by themselves. So they do not work as individuals. In multicellular organisms, cells work together. We tend to find many cells grouped together, and they function in this way as a group. And this group of cells that looks the same and functions the same, in other words, it has the same structure and function, we call this a tissue. Now, we're going to start off focusing on an investigation into plant tissues. This is a very important graphic. It shows you how levels of organization happen in a plant. We've already discussed that the cell is the most fundamental, basic working unit in an organism. Many cells of the same type group together to make a tissue. What you see here is an example of epidermal tissue. That is the tissue that covers the outermost layer of all plants. Now, if we took many different tissues, for example, the protective epidermal tissue, the water-conducting tissue, the food-making tissue, and we put all these different tissues together, we would get what is called an organ. In this case, the leaf of a plant. So this leaf has epidermal tissue, but it also has other tissues, and that is what makes an organ. The root, the stem, the flower, those are other examples of organs of plants. Put all of those different organs together and you get the organism. In other words, the whole plant. Now, when you study tissues, the two important concepts that you need to be able to consider all the time are structure and function. A plant tissue, or an animal tissue, as you will discover later, has a particular structure. That means it has a particular shape, size, appearance. And that is because it has to fulfill a certain function. Now, as a simple example, think about your own knife and fork that you use in order to eat. The knife has a blade. The fork has what we call tines. That is what these ends are, the prongs of the fork. You battle to cut your food with the tines of a fork, but it's very simple to cut your food with the blade of a knife. In the same way, it's far easier to stab the tines of the fork into the food and lift it to your mouth than what it is to get the food to your mouth on the blade of a knife. And so we can see that the structure of these two implements is all to do with, or is shaped and structured in such a way that it can carry out its function. And so it is with plant tissues as well. The structure is directly related to the function of the tissue. Now, what kinds of plant tissues are there in a plant? Well, the types of tissues that we're going to find are divided into two main groups. We find meristematic tissue and permanent tissue. And in our lesson tomorrow, we're going to focus on meristematic tissue. Basically, meristematic tissue is tissue that continues to divide. Meristematic tissue helps the plant grow bigger because it is constantly dividing. On the other hand, permanent tissue has specialized, and we get different kinds of permanent tissue. We get tissue that acts as a protection layer. We get tissue that acts to transport, and we get water transporting tissue as well as food transporting tissue. We get tissue that also has to make food, act as a packing tissue, and strengthen and support the plant. And we group these tissues under the heading of ground tissues. And so we can see that there are many different kinds of tissues that we're going to be exploring. And the one that we're going to start off looking at tomorrow is meristematic tissue. Here is your homework question. Are you able to take these 4 terms and place them in order of complexity so that we can see how the body of a plant is in fact built up? Organize these terms from the simplest to the most complex. Most simplest of these terms is, of course, the cell, because we know that the cell is the basic functional unit of all living organisms. When we put many cells that look the same together, we get tissues. Tissues are organized together to make organs, such as roots, stems, leaves, and flowers. And if we put all the roots, stems, leaves, and flowers, in other words, all the organs together, we will get the whole plant, the individual plant, which is called the organism. Join me again tomorrow when we start looking at tissues in detail. For today, goodbye.